Have you ever felt like you're living in two worlds at once? Like everyone around you is playing a game with rules you can no longer follow? If you've ever sat in a crowded room and felt completely invisible, or smiled through conversations that feel utterly meaningless, this isn't happening because you're broken. It's happening because you've seen something that cannot be unseen. Today, we're going to talk about why spiritually awakened people feel like strangers in their own lives, and why this feeling of not belonging might be the most honest experience you've ever had. There's an invisible wall that appears after awakening. It's not something you build intentionally. It simply forms between you and the world you used to know. You walk into familiar places, surrounded by familiar faces, yet everything feels foreign. The conversations that once engaged you now sound hollow. The pursuits that once drove you now seem pointless, and the strangest part, nobody else seems to notice. They're still chasing the same things, worried about the same problems, celebrating the same victories. But you're watching it all as if from behind glass. You can see them, hear them, even interact with them, but there's a distance now that wasn't there before. This distance doesn't come from judgment or superiority. It comes from clarity. You've glimpsed behind the curtain of reality, and now the stage play everyone else is performing in looks different to your eyes. When you awaken, you don't just gain new insights. You lose something too. You lose the ability to take the world at face value. Every advertisement, every social expectation, every cultural norm that once seemed solid now appears transparent. You see the fear driving people's choices. You see the pain hiding behind their smiles. You see the desperation in their need for validation. And this seeing is exhausting, because once you recognize that most of human behavior is driven by unconscious patterns, by deep-seated fears of not being enough, of not mattering, of disappearing into nothingness, you cannot participate in those patterns with the same enthusiasm. You cannot chase status when you see that status is just a collective agreement to pretend certain things matter more than others. You cannot compete ruthlessly when you understand that competition is often just fear wearing an aggressive mask. This awareness creates a peculiar kind of tiredness, not physical exhaustion, but soul fatigue. The fatigue of constantly translating between two realities, the reality everyone agrees upon, and the reality you've discovered underneath it. Small talk becomes almost impossible after awakening, not because you're incapable of it, but because it feels like speaking a language you've outgrown. When someone asks about your weekend or complains about traffic or discusses the latest celebrity drama, you find yourself nodding along while internally feeling utterly disconnected. You're not trying to be difficult. You're not attempting to be mysterious or aloof. You simply cannot generate genuine interest in conversations that dance around the surface of existence without ever diving into the depths. You want to talk about what it means to be alive, about the mystery of consciousness, about why we're all pretending that accumulating possessions will fill the void inside us. But you quickly learn that bringing up these topics at dinner parties makes people uncomfortable. They shift in their seats, change the subject, or worse, they look at you with concern as if you might be having some kind of crisis. So you learn to play the game. You ask about their jobs, their vacations, their renovations. You laugh at the appropriate moments. You nod sympathetically when expected, but, inside, you're screaming with loneliness because nobody is really talking about anything that matters. Awakening strips away your ability to wear masks comfortably. The personas you once adopted so easily, the roles you played without question, they no longer fit. It's like trying to wear clothes from your childhood. Technically, you can force yourself into them, but they're restrictive, uncomfortable, obviously wrong. You become allergic to pretense. When someone asks how you are, and you know they don't really want to know, you struggle to give the automatic fine, thanks response. When you're expected to be impressed by someone's accomplishments, but You see those accomplishments as just another way of avoiding deeper questions. You cannot master fake enthusiasm. This authenticity, this inability to pretend, makes social navigation incredibly difficult. Because society runs on polite lies, on agreed-upon fictions, on not saying what we really think or feel. And you've lost your tolerance for that game. Not because you want to be rude or difficult, but because fakeness has become physically painful to you. Every false smile, every performative gesture, every calculated response feels like a betrayal of the truth you've touched. So you withdraw. Not because you hate people, but because being around them in their unconscious state feels like drowning. You need space to breathe, space to be real, space to exist without constantly contorting yourself to fit into boxes that were always too small. There's a grief that comes with awakening that nobody talks about. It's the grief of losing your innocence about life. You can no longer believe in the fairy tales culture sells us. You can no longer think that if you just work hard enough, achieve enough, accumulate enough, you'll finally be happy, finally be safe, finally be whole. You see that the entire system is designed to keep people running on a hamster wheel, chasing carrots they'll never catch, believing that fulfillment is always just one more purchase, one more promotion, one more relationship away. And once you see this, you cannot unsee it. The magic trick has been revealed, and you're left sitting in the audience watching everyone else gasp at illusions that no longer fool you. Skit, this creates a strange kind of mourning. You mourn the simplicity of believing. You mourn the comfort of having clear goals and obvious measures of success. You mourn the ease of fitting in, of belonging, of not questioning everything. There was a certain peace in unconsciousness, a blissful ignorance that protected you from the overwhelming complexity of reality. But that protection is gone now. You're naked in a sense, undefended, exposed to the rawness of existence. And while there's liberation in this nakedness, there's also profound vulnerability. You feel everything more intensely. The beauty, yes, but also the pain. The suffering of the world is no longer something happening out there. It's happening in the field of awareness that you are. Every act of cruelty, every expression of fear, every moment of desperation, you feel it all because you've recognized that there's no real separation between you and them. Here's the cruelest paradox of awakening. The moment you realize you're connected to everything, you feel more alone than ever. Kikutia. Because you see the unity, the oneness, the fundamental interconnection of all existence, but everyone around you still believes they're separate, isolated, alone. You're speaking the language of wholeness in a world that only understands the grammar of separation. You want to share what you've seen, to help others recognize their true nature. But you quickly learn that awakening cannot be taught. It cannot be explained in a way that transmits the actual experience. Words fail. Concepts fail. Logic fails. The truth you've touched is beyond language, beyond thought, beyond the rational mind. It can only be experienced directly, and you cannot force someone to have that experience. So you're left in this impossible position. You see that underneath all the apparent differences, everyone is the same consciousness wearing different costumes. But they don't know this. They genuinely believe they're separate individuals competing for limited resources in a hostile universe, and your knowing doesn't help them. Your awareness doesn't lessen their suffering. You can offer pointers, hints, reflections, but ultimately each person must wake up on their own terms, in their own timing, through their own path. This helplessness is agonizing. You watch people you love suffer unnecessarily, trapped in mental prisons they've built for themselves, and you cannot set them free. You can only stand at the door of the prison and wait, hoping they'll eventually notice the door was never locked. But let me tell you something crucial. This alienation, this sense of not belonging, it's not punishment. It's not evidence that you've made a mistake or taken a wrong turn. It's actually the greatest gift you could receive, disguised as suffering. Because what you've lost in comfort and belonging, you've gained in truth and freedom. You no longer need external validation to know your worth. You no longer need to achieve or accumulate to feel complete. You no longer need to be liked or understood or appreciated by everyone you meet. These needs haven't disappeared entirely. You're still human after all, but they've loosened their grip. They no longer run your life. And in that loosening, there's enormous freedom. Freedom to be yourself without apology. Freedom to speak truth even when it's unpopular. Freedom to walk away from situations and relationships that require you to be less than you are. Freedom to choose authenticity over approval, reality over comfort, depth over superficiality. Yes, this freedom comes with loneliness. Yes, it comes with the pain of feeling out of place. But consider the alternative. Spending your entire life pretending, performing, contorting yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed for your true shape. That's not peace. That's prison. And you've escaped. You've broken free. The fact that the world outside the prison looks strange and unfamiliar doesn't mean you should go back inside. The beautiful secret is this: you're not as alone as you think. All throughout history, in every culture, in every generation, there have been people who woke up, who saw through the illusion, who felt this same alienation. The mystics, the poets, the philosophers, the artists, the seekers. They've all walked this path before you, and they're walking it now too. In every city, in every country, there are people having the same realization, feeling the same loneliness, carrying the same understanding. You just haven't found each other yet. But when you do, when you meet someone who's genuinely awake, there's an instant recognition, a soul-deep knowing. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to translate. You can finally speak in your native language, and they understand every word. These connections are rare, but they're real, and they're worth the loneliness that precedes them, because one authentic connection with someone who sees what you see is worth more than 1,000 superficial relationships with people who only know your mask. So if you're feeling out of place right now, if you're struggling with the loneliness of awakening, if you're wondering whether this journey is worth the pain, let me offer you this perspective. You're not broken. You're breaking open. You're not lost. You're finding yourself. You're not alone. You're discovering that you were never separate to begin with. The discomfort you're feeling is the discomfort of growth, of transformation, of becoming real in a world full of pretense. It's the discomfort of a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. Painful, yes. Difficult, absolutely. But necessary. And ultimately, liberating. Don't rush this process. Don't try to fix your loneliness or solve your alienation like they're problems to be eliminated. They're not problems. They're portals. Doorways into deeper understanding, greater authenticity, more profound freedom. Walk through them. Feel what needs to be felt. Grieve what needs to be grieved. And trust that on the other side of this dissolution, something new is being born. You are exactly where you need to be.